Hello everyone, my name is Shambhavi. Hope you all are doing well. So, we were discussing about the different types of constraints, right? We were having the SQL constraints we were discussing about, and onto that we had already seen about the not null, the unique, and the primary key. Great. So now I'll be taking you to some of the next as well, which we are having right here for to the some of the next constraints, right? Next, after the primary key, we have the foreign key. Then the next key which we are having, that's the foreign key. Okay, right here. So what it is actually, so I would just mention out the things that a foreign, right here. So a foreign key is a field. A foreign key is a field a foreign key is a field which can uniquely, a foreign key is a field which can uniquely identify each row, which can uniquely identify out the each row in another table, in another table, right? This is what okay, one second, I didn't write out this in another, and here we go with a table right here. Fine. So a foreign key is a field which can uniquely identify out the each row in another table, right? And what else we are having for the foreign key? So it goes, and this particular constraint and this constraint and this constraint is used to specify, and this constraint is used to specify out the field as foreign key, fine. So yeah, this is regarding out the foreign key, that a foreign key is a field which can uniquely identify each row in another table, and this particular constraint is used to specify the field as a foreign key. So the case it goes that when we specify out the field as a foreign key, so yeah, this is one of the constraints where we just use this out. So this is particularly used for, and it's used for uniquely identifying out the rows in the another table, right? Let me just come down right here and take you to the number 5th constraint. So the next constraint which we are having right here, that's the check. Okay, we are having another one, that is the check. This is, I could say, this is the second last one. Okay, right. So what is this particularly? So I mentioned out this constraint, this right here. So this constraint so this constraint helps to validate the values. So this constraint helps to validate the values of a column to meet a specific or you could say a particular condition. I would just write a condition downside because above it is not gonna come up. Great. So this particular constraint helps to validate out the values of a column to meet a specific or you could say a particular condition. Okay. Now, next I put out a dot, and here goes. That is, I would mention out that is, it basically, that is, it helps to ensure that the values is stored. It helps us to ensure that the values is stored in a column like this. Let me come down and get out some space for me. So okay, till the time I would just write out this one things here, that this particular constraint helps to validate out the values of a column to meet a specific or a particular condition. That is, it helps to ensure that the values stored in a column meets meets a specific condition, meets a specific condition. So yeah, this is regarding this particular next constraint that were dealing with. That's a check constraint. So this particular constraint, what it does, it helps you to validate out the values of a column. And why we just need to do or validate out the the values of a column, so that it particularly meets out the specific conditions. So whatever the specific conditions you are having, it particularly meets those out. So it's compulsory to validate out the values of a column. Now that is basically, it helps us to ensure that the value sorted in a column meets out a specific condition. So basically, what are the values you are having? If that are sorted, so it meets out a specific condition. Right, now I'm going to come down here with the next particular constraint, and that's the last constraint. Okay, and the next one which we are having here is default. So here goes the default. Fine. So let's discuss about this particular thing. So this constraint, Traint. So this constraint specifies a default value, for the column. So this particular constraint specifies a default value for the column where no value is specified by the user. So into default case, what happens? In default case, it happens that we have outer constraint and it specifies our default value for the column where no value is specified by the user. Now, in the case, let's say you are making out a table, you are putting on some values into the row, some onto the column. So there could be a case that you haven't mentioned out any of the value in any of the particular case. In either of the row, you haven't mentioned out the value, right? So in that particular case, this default is the constraint which is used out. Okay, so this particular constraint specifies out a default value for the column where the case is no value is specified by the user. Fine. So let me take you above here for a short while and let's discuss about the foreign key. So yeah, foreign key, we had already seen out that it is one of the fields which could uniquely identify out each row in another table, right? Which could uniquely identify each row in another table. And this particular constraint is used to specify out the field as a foreign key. The case where you just specify out the field as a foreign key, and that is that when you uniquely identify each row in another table, right? Next we have the next function, that's the check. So this particular constraint helps to validate out the values of a column to meet a specific or particular condition, whatever you just want to say. So this is one of the constraints which helps you out to validate the values of a column. And why are these done? So as to meet out a specific or a particular condition. That is, it completely helps you to ensure that the values stored in a column meets out a specific condition. Right? What about the default? So this constraint specifies out a default value for the column where no value is specified by the user. So into this particular constraint, what happens that we specify out a default value for the column, and that goes where no value is specified by a user or anything like that, right? Now, other than that, basically how we specify out the constraints. So we basically specify out the constraints at the time of creating of the table. Let me tell you that thing as well. Let me just put down here. Okay, 1 second. Okay, right here. And okay, let's mention that out, that how you specify constraints. Right here, how you specify out the constraints. So I would just write that we can specify constraints. We can specify out the constraints at the we can specify the constraints at the time of creating. We can specify out the constraints at the time of creating the table, using create table statement. So yeah, this is how we specify out a constraint. That whenever we specify out the constraints, one second, NTS, right? So at the time of creating out the table, when we use out the create table statement, and in that particular case, we just specify out a constraint. Okay. Now we can also specify the constraints after creating a table using alter table statement. So I would write that as well. Once let me put on that. So I could write out that we can also, let me get out some space here, that we can also specify, right? So we can also specify the constraint after creating. So we can also specify out the constraints after creating table using alter table statement, right? So like this as well, we could specify out the constraints that after creating out the table using alter table statement, we could make out and we could put on and specify out the constraints at that particular place as well, right? So hope I made these things very much clear to you, that how we can specify out the constraints, how we can make out the constraints, and what are the different constraints which we are having in the SQL, right? So this is all for this video. Till then, thank you and take care.